Right, I'm videoing now. Okay.
Keep this door open so we get a bit of air circulating. But thanks very much for coming, everybody. I won't get involved in business because we want to get on. I would like to welcome two members from Bedford who've come to join us.
Yeah, that'll be fine.
And we'd like to see more Bedford members. You're very, very welcome to come and join us at our meetings. So now you know where we are. Yes.
Broken your way into the car park.
Wendy and Bob very kindly arranged this meeting for Carol and Jonty Pearce to come and talk to us about Man Overboard. So I'll hand it over to them in a second. For any of you who are new, if you would like some information or to be on our mailing list, please put your name and email address on this, and we'll keep you informed, and hopefully you'll join us. But we'd be very happy to keep you informed about meetings and so on. And I think Bedford gets our newsletter anyway, don't you? So
yes, they do.
Yeah. Okay.
Peter, Simon Honour, guest.
Yes, and hopefully a new member.
Well, hopefully. I've tried it before, but he came to Tom Cunliffe night, but he promised that he'll sign up and everything like that.
Well, if you give your, don't worry about signing up, just give your money to Bob. Okay. David as well. Just give your money to Bob. We don't like paperwork.
That way to pay it for you.
Over to you, Bob.
So, welcome, Carol and Jonty. Thank you very much for coming along. It's fantastic. So, we heard their presentation in the Cruising Association in London on a one-day seminar there, and we were said to say that we were encouraged to bring them along here to have a chat to you guys. We'll just hand over to them.
Well, we were just about to sort of start off, kick off by how many people here have not experienced a man overboard situation? A real not. Right. So, how many have experienced a man overboard situation? And both of mine have been in marinas.
You really must be more careful.
Really must be more careful with marinas, yes. So no, not warm water at all. Milford Haven was one, but yes. So. And I think that those who have experienced that know the actual difficulty of actually getting somebody back, even if you've got loads of people to help, and even if it's only getting somebody up onto a pontoon or onto the side of a fairly small boat. So it's all very easy. We all go out and we all do our man overboard drill, don't we? We all do this, and we all assign roles to each member of our crew, and we all know exactly what we should do. And we all do the ritual pick up a bucket or pick up a fender. But what actually happens when you actually try to pick up a member of crew who's really fallen over, and also if you're short-handed, as Bob and I probably 80% of the time we're sailing just the two of us, what on earth do you do first? Do you get on the radio? Do you stop the boat? Do you keep pointing? All the things that you're taught to do in the RYA courses. Which do you actually do first, and which do you sort of push to the bottom of the list? And then you've actually got to pick somebody up. And this is what this is what Carol and Jonty have addressed, and particularly if it's the bigger and stronger member of the crew who actually ends up in the water. So over to you guys.
We addressed it as far away as we possibly could. I'm sorry, we won't quite match the greats like Tom Cunliffe or anything at all like that.
Welcome to the talk on man overboard recovery, with the accent being on recovery. As Wendy's pointed out, we all know about man overboard drill. If there's two of you, you can't stand there pointing. It's We will talk about that later. But it is the recovery. Nobody ever tries this. The title, An 8-Stone Woman, I Wish. This was Yachting Monthly's suggestion, and it is predicated on one thing. It is the man who is more likely to go overboard. It's the man, and I'm not being sexist here, in our situation, that is the case. Jonathan does far more deck work than I do. If anybody's going to go overboard, it is going to be him. Or you could look at it as a worst-case scenario. What would happen if the heavier member went overboard? And it's also predicated on the fact that, our talk is predicated on the fact that it's a sailing wife as opposed to a lady sailor. How would you manage to recover your man if he went overboard?
Now, as you can see, I'm a fairly heavy unit, and I know that if I actually went overboard before this talk and all the practice, I think I'd probably be dead. So I had a great vested interest when we contacted Yachting Monthly. I know Carol's got me well insured and all the rest of it, but you know, as I say, I am a heavy unit. And
now, this happened to Duncan Wells in London. Duncan Wells's life jacket did not inflate.
Try again.
Try again.
It's a new bowl. There we go.
Now, he's an even bigger unit with this on, and we're doing this for a reason. This isn't just for fun. Get out to the right of the. I just wanted to show three things on here. The D-ring, as you can see, this line of sight. The D-ring here is not easy to see. What we discovered in London, in fact, is this is not the lifting point. The lifting strop, which has not come out. That is the lifting strop. That is what you're supposed to use to get the man out of the sea. Since the talk, we have now bought one of these, which, when Jonathan goes in the water, this should float out horizontally, and that gives you this reinforced end, a loop that you can get something in. If I bring over most people's instinct would be to go for the boat hook. And we just wanted to demonstrate that it is very difficult, extremely difficult, to get your boat hook in the D-ring. Yeah. If you've got this floating out, you've got far more chance of getting your if you do use the boat hook, and we'll talk about that later, but you've got a far much greater chance of picking up the man, or at least securing the man, rather than picking them up.
This flimsy bit of rope is 4mm Dyneema and would lift 10 of me, believe it or not. And it's very useful because not only can you be lifted from it if you're brave enough, but you can also hook it over a cleat on the side and stop floating away, and that will come later.
You can see how hidden the D-ring is here and how difficult of accessibility, which is what most people would be looking for.
I can't see it at all.
And also, he's on his back. You've got these great big bags in front of your eyes.
May West.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to take it off now?
It's the green strap. That's a standard part on all life jackets.
That's a standard part on all life jackets, and in fact, that is the lifting bit. And in every life jacket, you will find this as part of the British standard.
But not the rope.
No, this is a Duncan Wells Life Saver, I think it's called. About 15 quid. He was flogging them at the Cruising Association, and we bought a couple because we think it's a jolly good idea.
Yeah. Having gone through this procedure, I'm very grateful to have those. Make it a lot easier.
How many people were aware of that lifting strop?
Very few. Some were, but it certainly was a real lesson to me. And you know, I've worn life jackets quite a lot. I try not to let them out that often, let them off that often. But yeah, it was quite an eye opener. And I think it really should be advertised rather more widely, to be honest. But it's a very important point. Now, anyway. Background scenario here was because of our worries. Unfortunately, Carol had breast cancer a few years ago, and I know that I'm not exactly the smallest unit in the world, as we were saying. And I had serious concerns about what would happen if I fell overboard. And we discussed this with Yachting Monthly. I'm easily 20 stone probably, even without pocketfuls of Milford Haven. I'd like to think I was less, but I'm not. Carol's very happy to be described as 8 stone, but at the time we were doing this test, she'd been weakened by the chemotherapy, radiotherapy, hormone, all that stuff, and most importantly, she was only left at about 80% of her former levels of energy and strength. And so, how can one so weak and feeble recover one bit built like a brick outhouse? Now, enter Yachting Monthly. They reckoned it would be a good idea to do an expert on board, one of their series. And they came on board. Chris Beeson was the technical editor, and he actually formulated the ways to recover me. And so this is based on his work. We had a professional photographer, Colin Work, and all the photographs are his, or nearly all of them. We used for the test our boat a high-sided southerly 105 ketch. It doesn't have a bathing platform or sugar scoop. We're not daft, did it in the middle of August a couple of years ago. Warm and sunny day, quiet anchorage in Milford Haven, and Carol pushed me overboard about a dozen times.
Legally.
Enjoyed every minute of it. We excluded a number of factors. Boat handling. We're not going to talk about boat handling here at all. Man overboard drill. Cover that elsewhere. VHF radio mayday, preferably DSC these days. When do you radio for help?
And I'd like to come in at this point. Even in the quiet anchorage of Milford Haven, with no tidal stream on a calm day, I was gobsmacked at how quickly Jonathan was drifting away from me. He was finding it very difficult to swim in this, trying to make his way back to the boat was really difficult. If he had been unconscious, he wouldn't have been able to do that as well. And my first thought was, well, the first procedure is when your man goes overboard, you go downstairs and you hit the DSC button. But my first feeling is I want my man secured on the boat. Once I've got him secured and I can assess the situation and I know what state he's in, then I'm in a position to give the RNLI some more information. At the talk in London, another lady was of a similar mind. She had done a real-life sea survival course out in, I think it was Poole Harbour, in quite rough conditions with the RNLI, and she said the same thing. They had a 4-knot tidal stream and her husband just disappeared into the distance. If I'd gone downstairs, by the time I came back up again, I wouldn't have a clue where Jonathan is. Although we've got personal beacons, what are they called, PBI, personal location, PLBs, and I know your last position is known, psychologically, seeing your husband disappear into the distance is not a good place to be. So I decided, personally, I am going to secure him first, assess the situation, then go downstairs. What you decide will be up to you. And we could discuss that later if you wish.
We excluded waves, bad weather, fear, panic, and lots of strong crew. There's just the two of us. When we sail, generally we're two up. So, you know, the RYA, when it says, oh, you know, somebody's a pointer and somebody gets the fender and the boat hook and all the rest of it, somebody goes down below to per radio. No, this will be panic. Carol at the wheel, trying to remember how to control the boat, how to bring the sails down, trying to keep an eye on me. It's amazing how quickly you can lose sight of things. So we didn't cover any of that. There's a reality check here. UK waters vary from 5 degrees in winter to 18 degrees in summer. It's different for those in the Mediterranean, of course. An average clothed person can spend about an hour in the water before incapacity, rather than critical incapacity, I'd say. The cold shock of falling into cold water can give you an initial gasp, and this can lead to drowning. And also it can raise the blood pressure, and this can give increased risk of heart attack or stroke. It's really quite serious. The body loses heat 25 times more quickly in water than in air. And this ends up with numb fingers, loss of dexterity, general weakness, and brain fade. Now, up in the Hebrides, a good few years ago, the then skipper of the charter boat I was on decided to reverse over the mooring buoy outside the old forge at Inverary. And being tethered by the stern there, we thought, better do something. And I looked around, and I was the person with the most natural insulation. So it was me who volunteered to go overboard. And with a bread knife between my teeth and just my swimming trunks on, I went down, I think it was 3 or 4 times. And I came up really quite blue, shivering, but what was the most frightening thing was I could feel my brain going. I was stopping, logical thought was disappearing. In fact, I was so severely affected that it lasted for several days, and the day, I think it was the day after, I actually proposed to my current wife. So it's a very dangerous thing. Beware of cold.
Just very quickly, don't worry about the follow the graph. It's just the first bit I wanted you to see. I was surprised at that quote. On average, you can last an hour in British waters before incapacity. That was news to me. And this graph seems to show the same thing. Along the bottom, here's your first hour, and it's just this first bit of the graph here. That is normal body temperature, and in fact, in the first half hour, the temperature rises, almost certainly due to the fact that shivering has begun. And it's only after half an hour that it then drops back to normal, and then there's a steep decline afterwards. I find that quite reassuring. You can always have that in your mind, oh, at least I've got an hour before he dies.
Jolly good. Now, planned methods of recovery. We're going to go through the 7 methods that Chris Beeson planned. The first one is with the casualties harness, as on a life jacket, clipped to the main halyard, being hauled in using an 8-to-1 winch at the mast.
So just a single line and then down to the 8-to-1 winch on the mast.
Second one, casualties harness hooked onto a 6-to-1 handy billy which was hoisted at the mast, the handy billy tail being led back via a snatch block to a 40-to-1 general winch. You've all got that, haven't you?
I'm so when we designed this talk, I am a sailing wife, I'm not an engineer, I'm not technically minded, I'm learning, but the terminology always gets me every time. And I said to Jonathan, we're going to have to explain this to some of the audience, I'm sure. So for those of you I'm teaching to suck eggs, just zone out for 5 minutes. But we did test this theory at our local sailing club, where I spoke to 4 well-experienced sailing ladies and the commodore of the club, a chap called Sledge. And I said to the 5 of them, how many of you know what a handy billy is, or have ever used a handy billy? And it was total silence for about a minute, until one of the wives said, I don't know what a handy billy is, but it sounds like a sex toy. Unfortunately,
the naturalist sailing club.
Unfortunately, my next query was, I went to the next bit of equipment and I said, okay, what do you envisage if I say to you a snatch block? In America, that's another meaning. And again, it was total silence, and then one of the women said, I'd rather not say. So just a very, very quick explanation of some of the terminology. For those of you who, like me, found the terminology a bit of a challenge. So a snatch block is nothing more than what most of us would call a block and pulley system.
A handy
billy, sorry, handy billy. So here we have a handy billy. It consists of a top block or pulley, a bottom block or pulley, and we've added, this would be the hook that would be put onto your casualty in the water. This one has got 3 falls, 3 ropes here. That means it's a 3-to-1 handy billy, and it gives me 3 times the power of lifting I would have rather than just using a single rope. So in the first technique that we had, which was just a single rope, I didn't have much pulling power. This gives you a lot more pulling power. However, if you're on the deck and you're pulling at this angle, it's not safe. So you have to attach the handy billy tail of the rope to a strong point on the deck. And for that, you use a snatch block. A snatch block consists of another pulley that you put the rope through, and then you've got this snap shackle that you can put onto a strong point on the deck, and then the whole thing goes round the winch.
That's a winch, by the way.
That's a winch, this bucket is a winch. So this is down on the ground, and that gives you a much greater angle of pull. What we have here is a 3-to-1 handy billy. Later on we'll be talking about 6-to-1. If you have 6 ropes in the system, there's an awful lot of friction in the system, but it gives you even more pulling power. The pulling power is what we call purchase. So 3 falls here, 3-to-1. Our general winch is 40-to-1. 3 times 40 is 240. So, sorry, 3 times 40?
120.
Sorry, 120.
You're a biologist, not a mathematician.
120. So a handy billy alone will give you more power, but if you can combine it with a winch, you get even more power. So that's quite a lot of lifting power. However, the ratio, the higher the figure, so 120-to-1 is good, but 150-to-1 would be even better. But if you have more ropes in the system, you just raise your casualty slower. It's much easier, much easier, but a great deal slower. So all you have to remember, if you're like me with the technology, is the bigger the number, the better your pulling power or your raising power, but it will be slower. And yes, if you want to use this as a sex toy, whatever floats your boat. Oh, block to block, yes. And one other thing that's going to get a mention later on is something called block to block. So if I want to raise, for instance, this is Jonathan down there. When you're raising, this is Jonathan, there will come a point where the two blocks, the two pulleys are touching, and you can't go any higher than that. So the bottom of your man, where the bottom of your man is at that point, matters immensely. You cannot go any higher once you're block to block. Also, if you store your handy billy block to block for tidiness' sake, actually extending them, actually pulling them apart is very difficult indeed, as you'll see later on. Okay, I covered everything there. Yeah.
So, now when I say the casualty's harness was hooked onto a 6-to-1 handy billy, which was hoisted up the mast, the handy billy tail being led back via a snatch block to a 40-to-1 general winch, you know exactly what I mean. The third method is as method 2, but with a handy billy attached to the mob mat, which we brought ours along here, can have a look at it later. It's in the big orange bag. But you'll see photographs of that. It's basically a hammock, as it were, that you can raise up. The fourth method, using the casualty in the rescue sling, a Kim man overboard rescue sling. But in this case, the tails run forwards to the electric anchor windlass drum to be able to pull out with electric power from the battery. Fifth method, using a stern ladder, just an unassisted climb. Sixth, using a webbing ladder at midships, either assisted or unassisted. And finally, me trying to climb into a tender at the stern, either assisted or unassisted. However, I found once I was in the water, as I mentioned earlier, that the inflated life jacket really limits your vision. I know I've got a big life jacket myself, but with a bigger one on top of it, you can't really see the lower half at all. So it also impaired the swimming. I couldn't swim on my front, of course, because the life jacket turns you onto your back. And so I was able just to scud around on my back. That's the only way I could move. Bulky clothing limits movements and climbing. And pockets full of Milford Haven do act like a sea anchor, and it saps your strength and adds weight, even more weight. Carol mentioned earlier the drifting away out of reach, so you need a rope or one of the lifesavers to secure the man overboard first. And I couldn't see the D-ring when she was handing me a rope to tie on the rope. Cold hands and panic can impair not tying, so a hook is a very useful thing to have, it's much easier. And also be aware that a casualty might be unconscious or hurt and not able to help.
Yeah. So for me, as I mentioned before, the imperative for me was securing the casualty. Now in Oriel we've got quite a lot of freeboard, and even at full extension, one's instinct is to go and run for the boat hook. And even at full extension, I could barely reach him. And as I've shown you, trying to get that into the D-ring, because we didn't know about the lifting strop at that point, was extremely difficult. And okay, once you've got your man, you're tethered to a dead weight in the water. You can't leave. You can't. What are you going to do? You can't leave go of the boat hook. What we do have on board, however, for another purpose, is this. This is the grab it, got it. Mooring version. Yeah. This is for getting hold of mooring buoys. And if your casualty is close enough to the boat, and it probably wasn't because the rate he was drifting away was quite alarming, but one way to get them secured is to, he does that, and then there you are. You can then tie that onto the rails. So that gives you great security, and you can tie them on, and then you can assess the situation, run downstairs and hit the DSC button. Now, there is another alternative we'll talk about later on. The other thing, of course, is to throw the life sling. This all assumes that you are close enough to the casualty in the first place, and that they're conscious. So there's the throwing line or rescue sling. Boat hook alone is a non-starter. The mooring hook we've just shown you. The difficulty is the one hand, one hand for the boat hook, one hand for the boat. What do you do with the line? Put it in your teeth. If you do use the boat hook alone, you've got the risk of being pulled overboard. And don't forget to secure the rope to the board. So securing is not easy, but the option is that your man's just drifting off into the distance.
Surely you tie the rope on before you offer it to the casualty.
That's the best idea.
Yeah.
Always
Yeah.
good. So, moving on to method number 1. Here is Carol slaving away at a 8-to-1 halyard winch. This is a Lumar, it's not a self-tailing one. Please ignore this. This was a later photograph, and just imagine that's a single piece of rope going down to me, not a handy billy. Preparation time for this, 30 seconds. Recovery time, nah. Quick and simple to set up, but it's a non-starter, because with the Lowe's purchased halyard winch at the mast, the gearing was far too low and too much effort for Carol. Because it's a non-self-tailing winch, you could only winch with one hand anyway, you have to tail with the other hand. And neither, in fact in our case, neither the main or the spinnaker halyard was actually long enough. Now we could use the topping lift, but again in our case we'd have had to replace that with certainly a longer line, maybe a heavier line. This might well work with the roles reversed though. I think I'd have the grunt to lift Carol out with that because she's a lot lighter than me. So it didn't work. So we went fairly swiftly on to increase the purchase, and with this we used the 6-to-1 handy billy. Here's the bottom block, here's a hook onto my life jacket ring. Here's the handy billy or block and tackle going up to the main halyard. And it comes down here, we've got one snatch block here on the strong point at the bottom of the shrouds, and it comes back here. You'll see that the second snatch block is actually just to give a good lead onto the general winch, and that the stanchion base is strong enough for that. And then we've got a 40-to-1 halyard winch with Carol winching me out. Preparation time, about 4 minutes, and we'll come back to that in a moment. Recovery time, 7 minutes. We had high hopes of this. It's a 6-to-1 handy billy with a 40-to-1 winch. That's a purchase of 240-to-1. An awful lot. But the handy billy was stowed block to block.
And it wasn't stowed very well either, it was just loose in the
That's because I did it.
loose in the lazarette. So you can see there's one of the blocks, there's the other, and they're very, very close together. The snatch blocks were just hanging off a ring there. They weren't actually in the right position. So it all had to be pulled out and sorted out on the deck and put in the right order.
So there's time taken for the to rig the snatch blocks and the winch. Here's Carol clipping on the snatch block to the base of the stanchion, and then there's time taken to extend the handy billy and hoist the top block. And Carol found that the only way to do this was to attach the main halyard to the top of it and haul away on the main halyard to stretch it out, and this pulls all the rope, all the line from the cockpit where she'll end up winching.
And he was in the water all this time, of
Yeah.
course.
Bob, just call me Bob. We marked our halyard in advance with a black mark to go with the black mark here, so we knew how high to pull up the top block of the handy billy. We thought that was a good idea. Wait and hear what happened. I had to clip the snap shackle on blind, but, you know, able to find it, and that was all right. And Carol started winding and winding and winding, about 180 turns, I think she counted, and needed rest even with the high gearing. For me, it was just, thank goodness for a padded crotch strap. Now, I experienced chest discomfort from being squeezed. I was dangling there quite a long time while Carol was winding and resting, so wasn't a comfortable experience. Now, just want to talk here, we mentioned friction in the handy billy a bit earlier. Our handy billy should have given us a purchase of 240-to-1. In Yachting Monthly in May 2015 did a test on main sheet pulleys. And they found that the friction in a 6-to-1 handy billy, which has 180-degree turns, ended up with a gearing purchase of a handy billy effectively more like 4-to-1 than 6-to-1, a 33% reduction. So in fact, we were only gaining 160-to-1, not 240-to-1. So friction is very important, and there is a balance between the human physical strength available and the gearing from the handy billy. Now, a more powerful general winch, or electric winches, if any of you have got electric winches, would compensate for the friction in the handy billy, and we'll come back to that one as well. Now, moving on to number 3, I mentioned the mob mat, and here I am deployed in the mob mat. It's got a fairly firm base. This orange bit facing us is to stop the waves coming in and smothering me. On the other side there's actually webbing so that you can climb up. And the bottom block of the handy billy is attached to the top there.
It's also designed to drain. It is a firm base, but all the water spills out of it.
Now, preparation time, 8 minutes. Recovery time, 15 minutes. This is quite a lengthy procedure. This was our highest hopes. The handy billy had been made to the right length for this, and the mark on the halyard had been made, and we thought that this should be the best method. It is, in fact, the only option, as far as we're concerned, if the man overboard is unconscious or hurt. And the horizontal lift does avoid any problems with cardiac problems. But it takes quite a long time to find and rig the handy billy as before. The removal of the mob mat, which we were storing in the lazarette, took some time. And here is Carol. It was stored in a white sack then, and excavating it from the side down here of the lazarette on board Oriel. And then she had to prepare it for deployment, and cat's cradle, look at it, you know, it's all over the shop. And then throw it over the side, and then had to manoeuvre the casualty into the mob mat, and we were using a boat hook.
Yeah, can we go back to the previous picture? What I'd forgotten about it, you can just see here there's an orange line going down that's led back to the guardrails, and there's one on the other side as well. And I was trying to get Jonathan into the cradle of the mob mat by bringing him in on the boat hook. I'd completely forgotten that the reason for these orange lines is that you actually move the mob mat underneath the casualty. So using those lines, you can pull the mob mat along because it sinks. It should go underneath. And that would have been a much easier method of getting him in.
Mind you, Carol had much more fun actually poking at me with a boat hook. You can't see the grin on her face there.
We just go back, because of our high freeboard, you can see there's our top guardrail, and I'm almost at full stretch, and I can barely get to Jonathan with our boat hook also extended fully.
But you managed.
I managed.
Then Carol started to winch and winch and winch. 180 turns. Here's the picture again with the tackle as before, back to Carol. But, you know, she found it quite hard. Remember that she hadn't been very well, and it was slow going, which is why it took about 15 minutes to get me back on board. But it was very comfortable, even though we ended up with a problem. We ended up with a handy billy block to block. So it wouldn't go any higher. I'd marked the main halyard, but what I'd forgotten was main halyard stretch. And of course my weight, with all the water and all the rest of it and that, the main halyard probably stretched 6 inches a foot. It's only a normal braided line. So I ended up scrambling over the guard rails rather than lying flat on the coach roof up here as the plan. We do have lashings on the guardrail, and Carol could have cut that. We didn't really want to do it for this demonstration, and we could have swung me in, but it was a learning point that halyards do stretch. Now, the fourth method was a halyard tail run to an anchor windlass. And here I am modelling our rescue sling, and the rescue sling has got a webbing strap that comes up, and then the spinnaker halyard, I think is boned on there. This was Chris Beeson's favourite. Preparation time 3 minutes, recovery time.
No, not in a million years. This was all based on the fact that instead of using my power to raise Jonathan out of the water, we'd rely on the electric anchor winch, which of course has got huge lifting power. However, it was very, very technical, and things went wrong at every step.
So, initially our halyards were too short, so we had to extend the spinnaker halyard.
That's after I'd found the spinnaker halyard. Because on our boat we hardly ever use a spinnaker, and who sets it when we're sailing? It's Jonathan. When I did manage to find it, the snap shackle was completely seized, and I didn't have the strength to. No, you had problems doing it. It was completely seized, so I had to get somebody else to unseize it.
And we had to extend it with a bit of gash line, which is why it was bowlined onto the rescue sling. We have no blocks at Orrell's mast base, so the actual spinnaker halyard had to get forward to the anchor windlass somehow, and so we had to wind it round the spinnaker halyard winch, and that had to be the right way. And then Carol would have had to have led the halyard tail the correct way round an anchor drum that she hates.
Never uses, because when we anchor, I'm on the helm and Jonathan is actually on the anchor mechanism. And I'm not very good at vectors, I'll honestly admit to that. I'm thinking which way things turn. I couldn't work out which way to put the halyard around the anchor drum.
We then had problems with riding turns on the anchor drum, and you know, not a nice picture, particularly when you've got somebody hanging there. That's fairly knackered. So we needed a snatch block to correct the lead. Now this is getting a bit more complicated, isn't it? So here we've gone down below and got our snatch block and put it onto the jack stays, and we've got a much better lead. So whoopee, should be just a matter of pressing the button and up I come. But here's Carol happily pressing the button, everything working fine, and this was fine, but I was just too heavy, and so I ended up dangling several times while the anchor windlass tripped out.
Now the trip is in the forepeak, so every time it tripped out, I had to leave Jonathan there, run aft, go downstairs, run forward, reset the trip, ran aft, back upstairs, yeah. By which time I was losing the will to live.
I was also getting a little bit bored, so I just scrambled over the guardrails thinking, sod this, we're going to Conquers. So, yeah, we could have used a handy rig, but that is rigging still more stuff. The only good bit about this was we found the Kimman overboard rescue sling excellent and far more comfortable than a life jacket harness. But as a method for Carol to get me back on board, forget it. Chris Beeson would have been able to rig it and do it, and I would have been able to recover Carol, but no, I'm just a little bit too fat for that. But the stern ladder, method number 5. Here's Jonty starting out bravely. Up we go, and preparation time 10 seconds, recovery time 10 seconds, quick, easy, even though my pockets were full. We used it well more than 10 times on the day. Every time Carol pushed me over, that's the way I generally got back on board. It's fine in an anchorage or in a flat calm, but if the tender is hung in the davits, you've got to lose that first. It needs a ladder that extends well down below water level, which ours does. It's worryingly close to the propeller, particularly if it's going round. And most importantly, the stern rises and falls in any sea, and this is dangerous, with injuries ranging from dislocated shoulder to skull fracture. I would not want to be there in any sea or waves. Non-starter in that case, but there is less movement at the shrouds, and a way of climbing on at the shrouds would be a good idea. And surprise, surprise, our next one is climbing the webbing ladder at the shrouds. Now, here we've got the a 4-rung webbing ladder hung from our shroud base here, and here's me agilely getting my leg over.
This is well impressive actually, because one of the problems was that the top rung is flush with the rubbing strake. And when Jonathan was reaching up to try and grab, there was nothing to grab round because the rubbing strake got in the way. And also the bottom rung, as you can see, is well above the waterline. So to even get his foot in, I thought was pretty good going.
This is how we initially decided to store, leave it there all the time. The webbing bag on the shroud base here. But as you can see before, I couldn't reach it. So Carol bowlined a couple of lines to lower it, and now the bottom rung is down here somewhere. I've got my foot on the second rung, but I've got nothing at all to hang on to, a vertical piece of rope, and I just was not strong enough to pull this vast bulk and weight here up with my arms, and every time I tried to use my legs, the ladder migrated forwards, backwards, under the hull. It wasn't very easy. And even when I got it straight, I just didn't have the handholds to help pull myself up. Carol came to the rescue and rigged the main halyard down onto my life jacket, and with that it helped me overcome my weight, and up I went and was able to scramble over. Now, preparation time 30 seconds, recovery time 6 minutes by the time we've got bits of rope and bowlines and all the rest of it. It's placed at the centre of the pitching axis, but our height size meant that our ladder was too short. Now, I mean, to be fair, we bought this ladder when we had a 22-foot E-boat, which is about that far off the water. So, you know, it wasn't the right bit of kit, and we'll admit that any day. When the strops were lengthened, it was reachable, but the migration of the bottom rung made it difficult and made it impossible for me to climb up. Nothing solid to grab hold of. You've got to have something to be able to hang on to and pull out. And the way Aura is, we didn't have anything. The halyard helped, and I was left fairly exhausted even with the halyard assist. But we have now modified the ladder system, and we'll show it you later, and also pictures later. Finally, you'll be glad to hear, Jonty climbing into a tender. We have a Tinker Tramp dinghy on davits, and here's the fall of the davit at the bow, and there's another one at the stern. And the idea was that I was able to climb into that, just shimmy over the tubes at the side. No way. So I ended up using the fall of the stern davit. But you can already see that this sponson is beginning to sort of go a little bit migration-wards, and next minute I'd be plonked on the head. I am glad I took off the outboard motor. Look where my head is and where the outboard motor would have plonked that, you know, not very nice. So Carol decides to climb down into the dinghy to stabilise it, and that made it an awful lot easier because I couldn't really get much of a purchase with my boot on a round sponson there, and with that I was able to wriggle in.
I had to sit as far forward, as far inboard as I could on this sponson to be able to reach his leg, and it was him getting this leg up onto the sponson in the first place was quite difficult. And if I'd gone any further forward or tipped forward, both of us would have been in the water. So I had to have my arms full stretch, and the only thing at this point that's stopping us from tipping is my left wrist, which is not very strong. There was a great deal of tension, a lot of tension, and I'm glad you got in fairly quickly.
And meanwhile, Mr. Blobby here manages finally to wriggle over the side. But, you know, this is a fairly extreme test as far as physical size between Carol and myself. But eventually, nice big grin there. Yep, we're in there. Preparation time 30 seconds, recovery time 30 seconds at best. It's a cheat. You're back aboard. You're not aboard, but you're out of the water, sorry. Once you're out of the water, you've got time to think your next step. So it does have uses. We've got to remember Oriel's tender was already inflated and on the davits, and it would be much slower if it had to be inflated first or dug out of some locker or down below or untied from somewhere. The dinghy flipped. I was told, oh, you should have tried it from the bow, but the bow is even more bulbous, and I'm quite bulbous. I don't think I'd have really got very far. And I think you'd have had to have a line tied from the stern to be able to pull up, or a rope. I can't really see it myself. Glad I moved the outboard board. Wouldn't want to be clonked by that. And when Carol jumped into counterbalance, it left Oriel unmanned. We were both in the tender. This is not a good thing. It was also quite a struggle and pretty energy sapping. In a rough sea, harder, might still be possible, so it's always worth remembering and thinking about. You've got to think constructively and laterally in these situations. So, lessons learned and modifications that we've made. What do we do after this session?
For us, it was a real eye-opener, it was a real wake-up call that you've got to know the drawbacks of your particular boat and your particular equipment, your particular strengths, the difference in the sizes. There's no one method that's going to work for everybody. Obviously, you just have to do it. And who does? Who's going to go overboard? Jonathan's about to retire in March, and we're probably going to be doing a lot more sailing than we have done before, and we will be practicing this, and somebody will be going in the water, whether it's me or him, just to remember how to deploy him, to remember how to do all this. You've just got to go and find out what works. You can see the number of pitfalls that we experienced just with these seven. Every method had something wrong with it.
Our club has just been to Holland, and we've enjoyed 2 weeks sailing around the Isselmeer and the Markermeer. We took with us 3 plastic buckets with handy billies all set up for man overboard drill and recovery. The idea was that we'd give it a try in nice warm waters and everything. I must say, if you'd seen the Markermeer and the Isselmeer, when you flushed the toilet, you couldn't actually tell whether it was sail urine or fresh water. I wouldn't want to swim in them, so we didn't really get very far. But we didn't even, during that time, apart from an initial brief trial, do proper man overboard drill. And I think we're all lazy at this, and I think it's something that we really ought to try harder with, and I was fairly surprised that we didn't actually do that. But our lessons learned, we've got the choice of 3 halyards. There's the main halyard, but this is only useful if the main sail's dropped. The spinnaker halyard, once Carol's found it. The topping lift, if it's lengthened, and there's always the problem of boom support if you don't have a sprung bang. We have a sprung bang, so that's okay for us. To avoid halyard stretch, you might wish to change to low stretch halyards.
And that was a real shock, wasn't it? You just weren't expecting it.
I hadn't anticipated that. You might consider permanently rigging a man overboard tackle at the mast for long passages, but it's more tackle at the mast, more things slamming around, getting in the way, tangle. And I think a lot of methods require a number of procedural operations, getting out our man overboard mob mat and the handy billy and all the rest of it, what order you do it in and everything. A laminated aid memoir can be absolutely invaluable. And we come to some pictures of the modifications that we've done.
We decided that we needed to change things, and it would be safest to do all this and try it without the pressures of being in the water. So because Oriel's got a lifting keel and because we've got a grounding plate, we went to a quiet inlet of Milford Haven. That patch of water there is actually Milford Haven itself, and this is called Sandy Haven. And just around the corner there, sorry?
Don't know why.
just around the corner there lives a man called George Llewellyn, and he'd seen us come in and he came up to see what we were doing, and he wanted to play with us when he saw that we were doing man overboard recovery stuff.
So George will feature later. But here we can see the mob mat, now in a nice orange bag and hung on the guardrails. Next to it, the Kim man overboard rescue sling. Next to it is our inflatable danboy, because we've got a mizzen mast, a normal danboy would get in the way. A horseshoe buoy, and behind it the life raft. So 5 safety items slung on the guardrail. Gets a little bit busy, doesn't it? But we modified our handy billy. If you noticed, the pictures earlier showed a white and red flecked 6-to-1 handy billy. This one's a blue one.
Yeah, but it is a 6-to-1 handy billy. So there's the tail end that I'll be pulling on. The 2 snatch blocks are now in position and ready to go. This is the bottom block, and then there's 40 metres of 6 falls leading up to the top block, and there with a little red mark on it is the snap shackle that goes onto the main halyard, and it all fits into this bucket. And there is the little red bit, so you just ping it out and it's all ready to go. And as you can see, to stop tangling, we've put these very weak little ties around them, so it's all neat. It's in a bucket, and that's what we took with us to Holland. 3 sets all ready to go.
So as we haul it up, we just undo the ties, and it doesn't need stretching out, doesn't need extending, it's all there ready. There's the bucket. I mentioned earlier more powerful winches. Now, I must say I'm not a fan of electric winches. There is an alternative. This is the Pontos Trimmer 4-speed winch. It's got a special clutch, a dog clutch inside. When the pressure comes on, it brings in 2 more gears. And instead of 40 to 1, this actually gives up to 112.9. You can wind it in with your little finger pretty well. Maybe not when I'm on the end of it, but it's a much more powerful winch.
That's slow. If you raise it,
Very slow.
Very slow.
Now we're going to see the method. Carol can now get to put the extended handy billy onto the mob mat, and the D-rings of, or the little loops of the mob mat are immediately there, and she can immediately hook the handy billy hook onto it and lift it up. It's a lot less. It is actually a lot easier, but it looks fairly busy there. And there's Carol getting the orange lines ready.
Except I've also got the handy billy wrapped around my body, so that was in the wrong position. But it comes up much more cleanly, and then you just throw it overboard. Once I've got it beautifully set up and thrown overboard, I have got the orange lines crossed, so it wouldn't sit flat against the side of the hull. So we changed that, we uncrossed the orange lines, we got the ladder strops which go against the hull. This is the protective side facing outwards, and there's a little mark on that one saying right, and a little mark on that one saying left, so I don't get them crossed next time I take them out.
The only thing we found was the little hook, a little protuberance on the big hook that we got there, caught on the guardrails. So if we put that the other way round, it would be nice.
And it did get caught.
Now, a series of pictures. Here's friend George manning the winch. I'm manning the camera. Carol's doing what she does best, really, lying down. I mean sleeping, sorry. Oops, that's a fair part, isn't it? Up we go. Very smooth and easy. Swing over the guardrails, onto the top, and Gentleman George gives Carol a hand out. That was actually quite quick, and there is a secret weapon. This is a lithium 24-volt Milwaukee with a special drive to go in the winch handle into the winch, and there's George. He wasn't even in the easiest. I think he was in the 2nd gear up or something. Pressed the button and whizzes away it went, and up Carol went. Very impressive. He uses this to lift up the keel on his boat. But it's electric, needs recharging. Electricity and salt water equals sulphur and little sizzles and things. I haven't bought one yet. We've also modified our webbing strap ladder, and we've used another old ladder which was from our previous e-boat, which hangs over the side at the mast where the shrouds come down. Plastic hooks go there, nice standoff there so you can get your hands around the rings, and the webbing strap tied onto the bottom. And when you pull the little yellow handle, look, before we were about there, I've got 4 steps below, and here's our model climbing up with a nice smile, and I did it several times as well. This was far, far easier. So, at the end of the day, success. Conclusions. Can an 8-stone woman retrieve a 20-stone man? Yes, in certain circumstances, remembering our earlier exclusions. Boat handling, man overboard, drill, the waves, the previous slide, basically. Man overboard recovery depends on the relative weights and strength of the crew and technical know-how. The anchor windlass one was a case in point. Carol hated it with a big capital H. As a result of this, Carol has kept it simple. That is how she get me back on board.
So if Jonathan is conscious and unhurt, both arms working, both legs working, I would use the extended ladder at the midship shrouds. Even in rough weather, he ought to be able to get onto that, and if he's also secured to the boat, he'll also be fairly safe as well. If he's unconscious, then it has to be the mob mat. If it has to be the mob mat, the only way I'm going to be able to raise that is with the help of the handy billy, and we have now got these wonderful Pontos winches as well, which gives me even more purchase in bringing him up. Having used the mob mat in real life, I've learned that unless you use it, you don't realise the drawbacks, like getting your strings the wrong way around. getting the mat itself facing the wrong direction, getting your hook caught in the guardrails. So it's well worth going deploying the equipment and trying it.
So, closing points.
We think there are 3 things that militate against successful recovery. The first of these is
Apathy. Not preparing sufficiently for your own type of boat and the available tackle on board. Until you actually go through it, you won't find out what the shortcomings on your boat are. And we've prepared quite a lot, and we found a lot of shortcomings.
So, any thoughts about the second thing that might stop you recovering somehow? Panic? Panic's a good suggestion.
Apathy. Not continuing to practice and develop your own methods. Regular drill will give you confidence and trust in your kit. And in fact, just doing this talk reminds us how to do it. So, it helps us. And there's a third point. Anybody guess what that might be?
Yeah.
No, complacency. Assuming that it will never happen to you, or that you will automatically remember the procedures. You'd have laughed at us trying to remember how the heck to do this talk, and what do I say now? What do we do now? How do I fix this? Where does this go? It doesn't come naturally. So thank you very much. And we can
I was going to ask you, how did you stop the handle getting in a mess? Because I've got a jibe preventer that if you don't store it with the block to block, you get it out, and one's been twisted through the runs, and it takes half an hour to get it untwisted.
Absolutely.
Those little lines around it are really essential.
I mean, we haven't tried this in anger yet.
You can even tie it with I use sometimes
just
wool
Yeah.
on the spinnaker.
The only reason I didn't use wool was because I didn't have any on board. Carol doesn't knit.
But I think the key is keeping it neat and tidy and
compact.
Yeah.
And it's just
and with the tag on it, so you know which end to put up first. And
Well,
which
we
goes
just
where.
leave the top end at the top,
at the
Yeah.
top.
and that just straight onto
So
the
you
main
want it
body.
almost idiot-proof.
Yeah. It's certainly Carol proof.
Because in a real emergency, you don't have time to think. You're going to get confused. You're going to be
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Your rope ladder over the side had wooden steps, didn't it?
Yeah.
When my parents had one, and I'm going back a long time, the bottom of it was a great big tube of lead that formed the bottom step, if you like. So it automatically, regardless of sea conditions, sank.
Yeah.
Made it much easier to put your feet in.
I mean, this one works quite well. And when you pull out the steps, the little standoffs are automatically held in place, and we'd be very pleased with it.
Yeah, it's the bottom one. The webbing rather.
Oh, the webbing.
There's
Sorry.
no leg.
Well, on a rope, on a little rope.
No, this one isn't. It's a plastimo and doesn't. Lead. We're not allowed to use lead anymore. It's like I'm not allowed to use mercury to take people's blood pressure in the surgery. Does it stop me? Does it?
Actually, talking of which, if you really wanted to make it sink, there's something you can get from haberdashers that people put at the bottom of net curtains. It's a whole series of small lead-shot weights, and you sew it into the hem of the curtain, and that keeps
Or
the
shower
blood-
curtains.
or shower curtains.
Or you could buy some lead shot from a dive shop.
From a
Dive shop?
dive
Yeah,
shop, or
very
a
much so.
fishing shop, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
We-
the only mention about the curtains is because it's already on a string, and it's already...
In practice, though, we found with this one that the plastic they were heavy enough to sink. So leaving them alone and it'll hang down in the water. The problem wasn't that the steps floated. The problem was that I couldn't get the leg over into them. If they're in the water, they would sink, and I could get a leg up if the bottom rung was high enough.
But perhaps
Here's
not.
having the handle.
The problem
reach
was,
up to.
I didn't have anything up here to pull up. I've got an
Right.
arthritic shoulder as well, so I don't have an awful lot of pull up, which is where the Pontos winches have really come in handy.
I guess depending on the sea state, it may not hang where you want it to hang, so extra weight's a good thing,
Yeah.
depending on the conditions.
Which is why we said, can you recover a man overboard in certain circumstances? In a pitching sea on a dark night with sails flapping everywhere?
Yeah.
I have not heard of anybody doing a man overboard drill in a force 7, in the dark, in the howling rain. I'm not going to volunteer, Carol. You must not push me over in the force 7. But you know, that's when you need. That's when it's likely to happen. That's when you need to go for it. And it's going to be me, because I'm going to be the one up at the foredeck. We have slab reefing at the mast. We don't have this single line reefing, which is all frictional, windy mast, in-mast furling. I'm a firm believer of slab reefing at the mast. It's straightforward and simple. And I'm also a firm believer of a short tether on my life jacket harness. And certainly we had quite a lot of discussion on jack stays and whether one should have a central jack stay. Some people were suggesting putting your tether onto a halyard so that if you might swing around. Quite a lot of people didn't like the idea of that, and I think you can get complications with shrouds and things. There isn't an ideal method, it's different for everybody.
The other thing that came up is that a lot of harnesses now have a long strop and a short strop, and you're supposed to use them in different circumstances. And when you're working on the deck, you should be using the short strop. We were told at the London conference about somebody who'd been using the long strop and had astonishingly gone under the guardrails, over the side, and the crew didn't notice until it was too late. He'd already been dragged through the water and had drowned. And I didn't. It was amazing how many people didn't realise that this double use of the harnesses.
And the other point about that, of course, is that all particularly if we use the D-ring at the front rather than the lifting strop, that's always at the front. If you're towed by that, how are you going to be towed? Head under. I did read that there was a life jacket being developed by a young lad with a lifting strop on the back, so if you were towed by that, you'd be towed on your back, which would be much better, but I don't think it's come to production yet, but a good idea.
What more can you say to us about the fact that you've made these modifications? You've decided to make these modifications. What really drove you to make those modifications, and without them, where do you think you'll be if something was to happen?
Our preconceptions how it would work didn't work. We have tested our modifications as best we can. We've seen a problem, we've tried to look for a solution. The ultimate will be to do it all again and test it again, which we'll probably do in a quiet, warm.
Yeah, I think for me it's the big reassurance that in good conditions, if you went overboard, I would now have the confidence to think I'll either do this or this. Before there were so many options, so many bits of kit. It would be like, what do I do first? Now I've got a procedure in my mind so that in relatively good conditions I could probably get him back on board. And the mob mount especially is a lovely bit of kit. And even the idea of moving the orange lines along when I was battling to try and get him through on the boat, won't do that anymore now.
So I suppose what you're saying really is that without this, there'd be a real risk that maybe you wouldn't be successful.
Yes.
Going back to our first premise that if I went over, I'd be dead. I don't want to be dead, I want to enjoy sailing. Yeah. And I think that the person more likely to go overboard is still going to be the more active or technical sailor, because they will be up on deck doing the reefing, doing the anchoring or whatever.
A lot of this is because Jonathan's strength. The boat's quite big and a lot of these things need strength, and of course at the time I didn't have much strength. I do go up on deck, and if anybody has to go up the mast to fix anything, it's me that goes up the mast, and I love it. Problem is when I get there I haven't got a clue what to do. So you just shout instructions.
And if I go up the mast I know what to do, but I look like Mr. Blobby on a stick.
Can I just ask you about the self-inflating life jacket? Because I've had 2 incidents when mine's gone off. And it gives you a tremendous shock, doesn't it? And I found that the restriction on my chest was really difficult.
Oh yeah.
It's high under my chin, really very unpleasant.
Quite agree.
And made everything very, very difficult.
That's what I was trying to show when this one finally went off. That's because I'd fired it a couple of times already, and I'd put an elastic band around the trigger method, which was actually a little bit too strong, so it needed a firm tug. But normally just a quick tug on that, and bang, they go with really quite an explosion, and you are absolutely stuck. It can be a shock, particularly if it goes off on deck, or when somebody was going under the guard wires, which happened to a friend of ours in our club, they got an award for that, and she got trapped under the guard wires, luckily in the harbour, with an inflated life jacket. Yeah.
We get our life raft modified for me, because you were saying about the strop.
Yes.
Going underneath.
Yeah.
And I haven't got the full body weight. You know, to pull myself on board the life raft.
Yeah.
This was lying with it fully inflated, and I was crawling along. I have done several sea courses, but I couldn't get that extra, so we had an extra strap fitted so that I could actually, when I did that time, then could
grab the strap. Yeah.
Weight,
you're a very wise girl. Yeah.
Cool.
Fully approved.
Because you go underneath.
Yeah.
Have you done that on your life?
No, we haven't, but I haven't ever looked at my life raft. It's always been in the case.
You've never been there when they've inflated it?
No, well, no. It's only been serviced once, and we've had to send it off. There hasn't been anywhere local to us that we've been able to drop it into. But I'd like to see it. Mind you, ours is now past its sell-by date, so I think a new one is going to be a retirement present.
Because it's knowing where all the things
Yeah, and what's in there.
Again, this is something I would advise if you are going to go off and do any extensive sailing, that this is part of your preparation, that you try out the equipment to see what the drawbacks are. It was a wake-up call.
It's for you. It's for you, not for the men.
Do you think? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Did you think about using the boom? I mean, I get the gearing on the winch, but having the boom over the side with the reefing, I haven't tried this.
Yes, we did, and in fact at the Cruising Association people were discussing different methods like electric winches and booms and all the rest of it. This talk is based on the article that was done in conjunction with Yachting Monthly and set by Chris Beeson, so we haven't presented that, we didn't try that. But I think putting the boom out over the side and using the main halyard, the main sheet, unhooking that from the bottom bit of where it goes on some boats can certainly work, and then swinging the person in, particularly over guardrails which have been, where the lashing has been cut, can certainly work on some boats. And I think this is the point, that there is no one way that suits everybody for everything. A boat with an electric winch will have a completely different approach to a boat with a manual winch. Using a boom that may be hoisted up higher by scandalising the sail with the topping lift to give a longer main sheet to lift up can work perfectly well. I think that it may mean quite a lot of rereeving. We found that we needed a 6-to-1 handy billy and at least a 40-to-1 winch. We don't have a 40-to-1 winch on our main sheet. Our main sheet's only about, I think it's a 6-to-1 or something, and it hardly needs that. So it depends on the tackle and kit on your boat and where the actual main sheet attachment is. Ours is in the middle of the boom, not at the end. If you've got an end of the boom attachment, much more sensible. So it wouldn't have worked for all.
Sure.
But very good question.
And back to your point of assessing your particular boat and its strengths and weaknesses. And
vital. You have to take a step back and think, well, that was interesting, but that's not relevant to us. But this might be, and this might work.
The other thing is
Sorry, gentlemen. Yeah.
Oh, yes, just two things. One a comment and one a question. The comment is a massive, massive thank you for this. It's such an eye-opener when I think of all the courses I've been on, including the Sea Survival, and probably collectively in this room, the hundreds of hours we've probably spent, read it all, taken the courses and so on. And most of this stuff is not touched upon at all. It's quite shocking in a way. So a massive thanks.
Yeah, good.
But the question is, what's your opinion now about, let's say, even a slightly more realistic scenario than the one you tested it with? Let's say waves, you've got the pitching boat and so on. How would you prioritize? You talked at the very beginning about the trade-offs. You go to the DSC, you get it back, and so on.
My priority, as I said, I'd only try and get him on board in relatively good conditions.
Yeah.
In horrible conditions, get him secured, then go down, as long as he wasn't bleeding to death. But if he was bleeding to death, I wouldn't be able to do anything about it, even if I managed to get
I'd be
him
dead.
out. He'd be dead anyway. So try and assess the situation, then ring for the RNLI. If I can't secure him, if it's patently obvious you're not going to secure him, then you go down and hit the DSC button. So these conditions are really, these trials are really for just chance where you might get them back on board. Of course, a lot of people have said that you should have a DSC button up top anyway, so that would be the way to go.
Because the thought of, just dealing with all this stuff, let alone, getting the handy billy sorted, or in a pitching sea,
Scary stuff.
it's
Scary.
pretty
It
horrendous.
is a nightmare situation, whichever way you look at it.
Sobering.
And it's very sobering thought.
Yeah. But I think you're very right, Carl, because if you're lucky, the RNLI will get there within an hour, at which time he's going to be dead anyway. If you prioritise the DSC and prioritise getting your Mayday signal out, you're going to have to take your eyes off him and go down. When you come up, where is he? He's gone. If you do your best to secure him, at least get him tied to the boat, that's got to be the first priority.
We haven't got a DSC radio in the cockpit. It is something that
We will. We will.
Oh, we will. Am I allowed to drill holes to put them there?
Well, when you're about to retire, we're about to do a lot more sailing, and this is part of the learning curve. We will have a DSC in the cockpit, but also once you've gone through this, you know you've done the best you could, and should you fail, you won't blame yourself because you know at least you were prepared. And you know that the odds are stacked against you in the worst conditions. But there's always that glimmer of it just might work and you're prepared.
We were saying that the first priority is to get your man attached to the boat.
Yes.
And I think that device, which with a line on it, is magic ingredient. Because if you're overboard, and then you have this floating line attached to the life jacket.
Yeah.
That is going to enable you, if you can get the boat close to your man, then you've got every chance of getting hold of that and getting them strapped to the boat. And we've actually got report on this.
There is actually another item like this being developed called the NOSCA line, which is actually a great, huge, long piece of line, I'd say 10 metres long, and it has a bit of something like a Christmas tree decoration, which is a target that you can put your boat hook into, which floats on the sea, and that will hook up the end. And then the idea is you can attach that directly to your main halyard and hoist the person up, and this flimsy little line is enough to hoist somebody up. I'm trying to get that to test. But my initial view of it is, certainly with my life jacket, by the time you've got a PLB, a line to whistle, and all the rest of it, these life jackets are getting a bit bulky. This isn't too bad, but have, 10 metres of line and bits more bits, it's getting a little bit much. So this actually fits inside my life jacket.
Have you thought of a floating line that you would try to throw to him, a long floating line? You don't want one that will sink and get around the prop. A floating line that would, you either steer the boat around it or get him.
In circles, yes.
Yeah, we have, and this rescue sling, once you pull it out, it's an orange sling inside, it's got a long line attached, which you tie to the boat, it's sort of the idea. You can then actually throw that overboard and then motor around or sail around in ever decreasing circles until you go up your own man overboard and pick them up. And so you've then got them untethered. And that's one of the methods I think that they show and recommend. And I think this is an excellent bit of kit as well.
The Duncan Wells Lifesaver as well, there is, as you say, because it's extended, you've got far greater chance of picking it up, and there's a lovely video clip, it's on YouTube, so showing it in action, and it does float and it does extend out.
But then that wouldn't be so easy to grab hold of if the sea was pitching.
And it was black,
it would actually be quite difficult.
I think it'd be easier to get them it's lifting, it's stopped.
Oh, definitely, yes. Anything's easier than
anything you can do to up the chances of it.
Yes. of course in Milford Haven you've just got the angle lifeboat, which is the other side of the water, haven't you?
Semaphore.
Which
Yes.
we don't have in parts of the Mediterranean, for instance,
No.
where it can be just as rough. So,
But we have gone across the Irish Sea. And
yes.
so just the two of us.
A lot of these methods are okay if the bloke's compass mentis. If you had a crack around the head or something,
Or broken arms.
yeah, or whatever, you've got a whole different ballgame.
Which
I have,
is,
to, I have to say one thing. I spent a certain amount of time in the climbing world, and I always worked on the principle that you fall off, you're dead.
Yeah.
And we spent a great deal of time trying not to fall. And I think the same principle should apply.
I like your thinking, and that is a vital point, that we're not always terribly good at wearing our life jackets and tethering on. We will do if the weather's rough, you know, the usual scenario situations. They are in allied pushes that, you know, wear it. They've got some slogan, I can't remember what it is. Yeah, sorry?
Useless and less
Useless and less warm. And I think that the life jacket will keep you afloat if you fall over, but it'll only stop you falling over if you are tethered on, so always think about that. And the old adage is one hand for the boat and one hand for you.
The RYA's motto is you should always wear your life jacket unless you deem it safe not to do so.
Yes.
Especially
And if you're a skipper of a boat, the skipper should tell the crew when he wants them to wear the life jacket, which is just about always.
Yeah.
The modern life jacket is so easy to wear, isn't it?
They are.
Very
Very comfortable. So, you know, having said that, I've just been in Holland for the hottest week for 100 years. I took my life jacket off, I was absolutely boiling. I think I was in danger of dying of hypothermia rather than drowning in the Isselmere. So I think, you know, it's sensible you have to look at the common sense issues. But it's got to the stage now that Yachting Monthly gets complaints all the time if there's any picture of somebody at sea not wearing a life jacket, and the editor is beginning to say, well, you know, it's natural selection. So we have
So we so that wearing a life jacket is really it's having a strap attached to the boat with the life jacket as just in case.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if the sea is rough, when you're coming up the companionway, before you climb out into the cockpit, hook on. If you're in the cockpit and you're hooked on and you're needing to go up on deck, use the other tether of your two-tether harness to put onto the jackstays. And then when you've got up to the mast, use the other tether to put around the mast before you take it off. And that is the safe way, and if it's rough and windy and all the rest of it, which is what it will be when you're going up to the mast to reef, it's what we always do.
And the other adage is if you think you should be reefing, it's too late, isn't it?
Yeah.
10 minutes
Yeah.
before you need to be.
Very much so. It's like if you think that you're drinking too much, it means that you probably are. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Just look at any of the equipment, do feel free to come and have a look at the long-mounted equipment.
That was fantastic, and thanks very much for coming all the way up from the deep south.
Oh,
Sunny
we've come from the deep west, not the deep west.
Well, it's almost as deep, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That's terrific. Thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure. Thank you for inviting us.
And have you anything to say, Wendy and Bob?
No, just that as, I hope you've been as engaged by Jonty and Carol's talk as we were at the CA back in November, wasn't it? I think. And I think having something like the printed sheet up in the cockpit, you know, what to do and what bits of kit are there is a really is a really good suggestion. And also practice.
I think we're all guilty of not.
Yes, not actually.
And everything you discovered because you tried it and it didn't work.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing.
That's the interesting thing, isn't it? Yes. But,
I have to say, we weren't expecting to follow Tom Cunliffe. That was
God.
There's another interesting one, is if the skipper goes over, who takes charge?
The mate.
The mate.
The two of you, that's fine. But if there's that was another example. Someone said that the skipper went overboard, and then no one else had been delegated beforehand to take charge. And they were all rushing around like headless chickens.
Well, the skipper should always have a mate designated in case the skipper's asleep
That's the
or
point Bob's made,
falls
yes.
overboard.
That is the point. The skipper, his task is to appoint someone, find them available, and so takes the station.
Well, the other point is skippers can actually never really remember how to do the man overboard drill, which is why when you do the man overboard drill, you say, man overboard, I'm it. Carry on.
It's a good
The other
point.
thing
You
about
said-
matings, I never allowed the skipper and the mate out of the cockpit at the same time.
That's a very good point.
Just in case you get a road wave or something with both of them.
Yeah.
It's a good point about appointing a mate, because if you sail with friends, you very often don't, do you? If you're on a charter, you might, but with friends.
In fact, one of the examples of man overboard, as I remember, was actually a guy who was in his swimming trunks off the coast of Turkey, a bit of the coast that some of us actually know quite well, and he'd gone forward to release a spinnaker or a cruising sheet that had got stuck. And he was in the water for some time before the people in the cockpit, I think there were 4 other people in the cockpit, before they realised he actually wasn't there. He was in the water and they'd actually gone some distance. Yeah, and in fact, on this occasion, another boat picked him up. But
he got the spinnaker sheet wrapped around his leg, and when he freed it, he got fired overboard. Quite powerful things, spinnakers.
yes.
Oh, what a wonderful
Absolutely.
Super.
Feel free to come forward if you want to get any of the
Yes,
feedback, for instance.
Well done, thank you.
Thank you very
Yes.